Buying a Mac Mini right now might actually be the biggest mistake you can make this year. Look, Apple completely rewrote the playbook at the end of 2024 when they shrunk this machine down into that gorgeous, micro-sized aluminum chassis. The M4 and M4 Pro variants have been absolutely flying off shelves. In fact, if you tried to pick up a base model earlier this year, you probably noticed they were completely sold out worldwide. Supply chain constraints got so brutal that Cupertino had to quietly kill off the entry-level 256GB version entirely, forcing everyone up to the 512GB tier just because they ran out of NAND flash storage modules. But if you think the M4 model is impressive, the incoming M5 refresh is about to make it look like a prototype. The real dilemma isn't whether the new silicon is fast, it's whether you're actually going to be able to get your hands on one when it drops. Let's address the elephant in the room first, and that is the physical design. If you're hoping Apple moves that hilariously misplaced power button from the bottom of the machine, I've got bad news for you. Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg has been hinting that Cupertino plans to ride this new form factor for a massive life cycle. We went over a decade without a radical footprint change on the Mini, so expecting a chassis redesign for the M5 is pure wishful context. It's going to stay identical to the current Micro Studio look. Honestly, I'm perfectly fine with that because the thermal management in this footprint is already stellar. The real magic is happening on the TSMC 3nm wafer, where the baseline M5 and M5 Pro are pushing architectural boundaries we didn't expect to see until much later. According to DigiTimes and supply chain whispers out of Mac-Otakara, Apple isn't stripping away any cores on the desktop version of the standard M5. On the entry-level MacBook Air, they often bin the chips and ship them with an 8-core GPU to save on yields. But just like the M4 before it, the M5 Mac Mini is getting the full-fat silicon treatment. We are talking about a 10-core CPU consisting of 4 blistering performance cores and 6 high-efficiency cores, paired alongside a native 10-core GPU. Now, we already have a pretty clear picture of how this chip behaves, because variations of this architecture started filtering into high-end iPad Pros and the updated Vision Pro lineup. The early Geekbench numbers are completely stupid for a computer that costs less than $1,000. We are looking at single-core scores averaging around 4,250 points. To put that into perspective, this tiny baseline block destroys previous generation Macs and Pro chips in pure single-threaded tasks. But multi-core is where things get genuinely comical. The standard M5 is pulling down scores north of 17,400 points. That puts it right on the heels of the old M1 Ultra. Think about that for a second. A baseline consumer chip inside a box that fits in the palm of your hand is matching the raw processing muscle of a multi-thousand-dollar studio workstation from just a few years ago. If you're compiling code, rendering heavy timelines, or running local LLMs, this leap is going to be instantly noticeable in your daily workflow. Let's talk graphics and memory because this is where the industry trends are forcing Apple's hand. The M5's metal score is hovering around 76,000 points, heavily augmented by dedicated hardware-level AI accelerators embedded directly into the GPU pipeline. This isn't just marketing fluff for Apple Intelligence. These specialized cores are designed to handle real-time graphical acceleration and matrix mathematics. But here is the catch that might ruin the launch. The ELEC just put out a report detailing a massive, industry-wide shortage of high-density RAM and NAND modules. It turns out every major tech giant is aggressively buying up warehouse space and snapping up component inventory to build massive AI data centers. Because of this massive enterprise demand, consumer hardware brands are getting squeezed hard. This brings us to a major question I want to ask you guys down in the comments. Are you planning to buy the M5 Mini as a compact daily driver, or are you holding out for the extra ports and bandwidth on the Pro? Drop your thoughts below because I'm tracking how many power users are shifting away from massive towers in tier. Ely. If you do decide to step up to the M5 Pro, the performance scaling is wild. Ming-Chi has noted that Apple is changing up its core terminology entirely for these higher-tier dies. They are leaning into a supercore architecture that drastically alters how multi-threaded workloads are distributed. On the 18-core variant of the M5 Pro, single-core scores mirror the standard M5 at around 4,200 points, which makes sense since the architecture of the individual cores remains identical. But the multi-core score skyrockets to an insane 27,000 points. That effectively outstrides the M4 Max from the previous cycle. Apple is achieving this by giving the Pro and Max chips parity on the CPU core count, choosing instead to differentiate them through GPU scaling and raw memory bandwidth. Speaking of graphics, the M5 Pro is pushing a metal score near 140,000. That massive leap is heavily driven by those updated neural and AI accelerators baked into the silicon. If you are doing heavy 3D rendering or working with multi-stream 8K ProRes footage, this thing is a miniature monster. But what is this going to do to your wallet? Since Apple is constrained by the global component crisis, the storage configurations are shifting. Multiple supply chain leakers, including Shrimp Apple Pro, suggest that the 256GB tier is officially dead across the desktop line. The standard M5 Mini will now start natively with 512GB of storage, while the M5 Pro will baseline at a healthy 1TB. Unified memory formats will likely hold steady, starting at 16GB for the base model and 24GB for the Pro tier. However, you need to prepare yourself for a potential price hike. With the baseline storage bump and skyrocketing component costs due to the AI server boom, expect the entry price to jump by at least $100 across the board. The Apple tax is real, but this time, the global supply chain is partly to blame. So when can you actually buy one? Initially, structural leaks from Ross Young and display panel distributors pointed toward a grand unveiling at WWDC this summer. It made perfect sense for Apple to drop a developer-centric powerhouse alongside their latest software pipelines. But the reality of the component shortage has thrown a massive wrench into those plans. Shipping millions of units worldwide requires a steady supply of components that Cupertino simply cannot guarantee right now. Because of this, a summer launch is looking incredibly unlikely. The updated consensus among top-tier analysts points to a late autumn release window, likely around October or November. Apple wants to ensure they have enough physical inventory to avoid the massive backorder disaster we saw at the start of the year. If you can afford to wait until the end of the year, the performance jump will be legendary, but if your current machine is dying, don't sleep on the M4 deals right now.